Hello and welcome to Bits and Atoms, the Grisham Robotics Founder Series. I'm your host, Elias Can, and today I've got Geoffrey, Taunton-Collins, and Artur, Kenzhaev, co-founders of Haelo, joining me. To get started, Geoffrey and Artur, would you mind sharing a quick intro about yourselves and Haelo?
Absolutely. So good to be speaking to you, Elias. And if I were to summarize Haelo, so the problem that Haelo is trying to solve is people worrying about their vulnerable relatives, elderly parents, or themselves if they want to live independently. So what Haelo is doing is building a smart ring for real-time protection, starting with older adults, vulnerable people living independently. And it's a wearable that, unlike other wearables, is designed to detect emergencies and alert loved ones or caregivers quickly in a form that people will actually wear. In terms of my own background, I've got a background in founding and leading the marketing for startups making innovative products. So that includes renewable energy, Web3, and having worked with our co-founder Alex before, another startup, this was a really exciting opportunity to work on Haelo and make a difference to families for a solution that families in general, I think, are really crying out for.
Great. And Artur, how about you as well?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Artur, and I've been coding since I was 12. And I was so driven to build that at some point I left Math University to focus on computer science and software engineering. But eventually I got the master's in computational linguistics and AI. I was also a ballet dancer, but it's a different story. Yeah, I think Haelo isn't just the company or startup that we built. It's a very personal story for me and for Alex. And I guess, yeah, we will talk about this a bit later, but we see a huge problem that we think we have to fix. There is no way not fixing it. We have to fix it, and as soon as possible. But yeah, happy to share a bit more about this. I'm CTO at Haelo Health, so I'm responsible for all of the software, hardware, everything we build. So yeah, I'm excited.
Great. And maybe before, because we'll definitely have some time to chat more about Haelo and everything on the product and what you're doing there, but maybe taking a step back and looking at you both personally first, what kind of motivated or aligned you for becoming an entrepreneur? What's kind of the origin story or original kind of motivation for you taking the leap to be on the founder side?
I can start. So I basically started as a founder. My first career steps were as a solo founder. I created a very small web studio when I was 19. Because I said I was been coding since I was a kid, and I thought I'm pretty good at that. So I thought, well, if I'm good at coding, why wouldn't I just start my own company then? And it was extremely fun experience, but I learned a lot about, I think, outside of coding, like how to ship the product, how to find the clients, how to communicate with them. And that level of ownership, that was something extremely exciting at that time. But then the company, I closed it, moved through several startups, and eventually became a head of engineering team at Yandex, one of the top tech companies in Russia. And essentially I had a very corporate career in the last decade. After moving to the UK, I also joined a startup, but then I joined JP Morgan and been working there as a senior vice president. But I always had that spark and that strive to build something that I really believe on my own. Because at a large company, you can definitely innovate, and I've been innovating a lot, building open source, trying to push the technology, and you have a lot of opportunities like that at the large company. But still, you depend a lot on the vision of the top leadership, the management, how they see the company should grow, and you can have a lot of ideas and a lot of innovation, but at some point, it has to be aligned with the mission and the vision that the leadership has. And it quite often happens that you can work on something and it could be cancelled after a year and it will never see the light. So I think being a founder, that's a totally different mindset from that perspective, because you just own the whole thing from the first day, basically. And every decision that you make, every opportunity you use, it has these long-term effects, and it's just up to you how you will execute this. And I think this is what is really fascinating for me, because of course it depends on the market and other people, but as a founder, it's completely different level of planning and commitment, because in the end it's just really up to you to implement this, make it happen. And I love that. Essentially every minute you spend, every decision is optimized and focused on that mission that you decided to follow, and this is your mission, your vision, and nobody else will actually implement this way. So yeah, this is my main motivation.
Nice. And in terms of mine, so my background a few years ago was actually in renewable energy. So I headed up a team in a renewable energy financial product solution team. So it was actually, our original product was very niche. It was in providing coverage, parametric coverage, in case wind farms had a lack of wind. So quite a niche product that, you know, was tied to a broader mission of trying to help, again, you know, trying to help in this case, reduce carbon emissions and so on. So I've got a little bit of background in that, in terms of trying to find solutions in spaces which I like to think make a bit of a difference. And so having worked, then working on a few startups, since then, including in the Web3 space, the opportunity to work with, to found Haelo was really exciting, because, you know, it's a clear mission company. We want to save lives. You know, we've got a mission of saving 1 million lives by 2035. And the opportunity as a founder to determine, for instance, the strategy in terms of the communications, the branding, and so on is really exciting, and I really enjoy doing that aspect of the business.
Absolutely. And I feel like for folks building in health tech, often that mission and making a difference is a big piece. Was there something also maybe to elaborate on why you chose this area of health tech as well? Was there something you felt structurally was missing, or end users weren't being served well enough by solutions on the market today? Why did you choose to build in health tech, even beyond the mission?
Yeah, I lost my father to a heart attack 11 years ago, and it was so sudden. My father was really young, energetic, with a large, big heart, and I still remember that call from the hospital and that feeling of being completely useless at that moment, and understanding that he was just discovered too late, and if he was discovered just a bit sooner, he had a big chance, better chance to survive. And it was 11 years ago, and at that time, I had to accept that. I didn't really see the way how it could be helped, because we didn't really have wearables as a thing, or as something accessible to like normal folks like us. And monitoring systems were not a thing at that time really as well. So I didn't really I experienced that loss, but I didn't know how it could have been prevented, to be fair. But moving a bit further in years, and I met Alex like 5 years ago, or we became really, really best friends. But a few years ago, he lost his father in a similar way, in the middle of the night, while his father's new Apple Watch was charging. And this time it was different. It hit different, because Alex actually bought his father an Apple Watch that was actually supposed to prevent or like notify or like help to work with these emergencies and make sure that he'll be more or less protected. But it didn't happen in this case, because it was charging. But still, it was the time when we actually, I've been wearing Garmin for a long time now. We are surrounded by a lot of extremely impressive technology, right? But we still lose people, loved ones, in this sudden and very unexpected way, but also in a way that we actually felt like it should have been solved already. And we kind of started to explore what's on the market, because literally Apple didn't work for that. So we thought, well, maybe there are other different options that we can recommend to our friends and family and loved ones so they can protect each other. Because again, you don't really think about this before you actually experience it sometimes. So having this experience of loss, we wanted to kind of find a solution for our friends and family. But we couldn't find the option that would actually work, because the existing pendants and monitoring technology, it's quite outdated, to be fair. It looks quite chunky, ugly, and quite a lot of people just don't want to wear them because it kind of signals that they are vulnerable. And modern wearables, they are very much fitness focused. They are all about performance, about sleeping and exercises, but they're not really designed for elderly people. They're definitely not designed for real-time monitoring and real-time alerting and emergencies management, because the way they work, they kind of collect the data on the device, then you synchronize with your app, you see the historic data, the projection into the future based on the collected information. But if you had a heart attack like 2 hours ago, it doesn't really help to see it in the app 2 hours later, right? So we felt like there is a huge gap on the market in modern wearables and technology and capabilities that we have, and what we can actually deliver to people who need it most and who need this protection the most. And with my software background, I kind of felt like in terms of hardware and components, we kind of have that. We already have these quite accessible smart rings that are not that difficult to manufacture. You can find a lot of smart rings in a really reasonable budget. But again, they are all optimized for sleep tracking or steps tracking. So I kind of thought that if we will repurpose it to the goal to actually provide the real-time monitoring and solve the problem of continuous communication between the device and the cloud, and kind of understanding how we can classify the events correctly, reduce the false positives, and actually build this network of support and family who can help in that moment, we could actually provide a solution that will work for families. So yeah, this is how we kind of started to think about Haelo. And then we went into this health tech space and kind of started to figure out all other aspects of this huge industry, and a lot of course, regulation, a lot of certification. You need to go through a lot of things that you usually not go through when you build just the software. But this is still exciting because I think we are on this mix of software and fast-paced product development that is based on really established hardware. So we can navigate this industry in a bit faster pace, I believe, finding this like middle ground between being really useful, but also being fast and not having to deploy the product in 10 years after all of the regulations.
Great. And also very sorry to hear about your father and Alex as well. I'm sure that as like a personal kind of story and motivator here is obviously very difficult, and very sorry to hear that. And you mentioned, form factors, and that you've decided to go with a smart ring as a form factor. For me, myself, and I'm sure for some of the viewers or readers, they're familiar with existing solutions, maybe like a life alert, or something that elderly people have worn around their neck, or is a stationary thing that they would click at their home. Why do you feel like the ring form factor is superior, or better than what kind of exists today for home detection?
So we think there are at least three reasons. The first is wearability. So in an obvious sense, a ring has a more discrete design. Ours is well, it's a discrete design and it's small. And in our case, we have a long battery life. So it's something that people will feel comfortable wearing, and they'll wear it when it matters. So one of the biggest problems in personal safety is people not wearing the devices, believe it or not. So I think it's 86% of pendant wearers do not wear the device 24/7, on a regular basis. So Haelo is designed to look like jewelry, have at least a week's worth of battery life, and avoid those gaps in coverage. The second reason is not having a button to press. And that's obviously particularly important in case of a fall or obviously if you're unconscious and have had a medical emergency that leads to that. So if a medical emergency is detected, Haelo automatically alerts loved ones. I think you mentioned, so Life Alert specifically, they don't actually currently have any devices with fall detection available. And Haelo is the first smart ring on the market that will have fall detection. The third reason is affordability. So legacy solutions, Life Alert, there are others like Medical Guardian, they will typically run to $2,000 to $3,000 on a 3-year basis, if you add up all the costs and subscriptions and so on. We think that's quite high, and it's a barrier. So there are lots of families who can't afford that, and we think everyone deserves to be able to have access to this kind of protection. So we've built Haelo to be available for under $500 over a 3-year basis, depending on the precise subscription, but under $500 is the target. So to summarize, 3 reasons, which are, unlike legacy solutions, Haelo is built to be discreet, worn 24/7, automatically detect emergencies, and be affordable.
Great. And I think I love how you kind of piece it out like that as well, because it just helps around making the case for why what you're building at Haelo is better than what exists on the market. And you bring up a good point too for Life Alert, that it isn't doing fall detection, it's reactive, it's not predictive, and so, or anticipatory, let's say. And so for you to be able to do that, especially if the wearer becomes unconscious or suffers an injury where they physically cannot move, it makes a big difference for being able to make sure paramedics or folks that need to get to the home or wherever they are can get there in a timely manner. And maybe one last question from me, and curious about this because it's always a bit more challenging, I think, for folks building in hardware as opposed to something that's pure play software, just given a lot of the physical challenges of building in hardware. I would say, question-wise for you guys is, what do you feel like's been the most challenging aspect of building in hardware so far, or maybe even something where you thought it'd be relatively straightforward up front, but then as you started to get into the process, it ended up being more complex or a bit more challenging than you originally anticipated?
That's a great question. And actually, coming from software background, that was probably the biggest challenge for me, to realize how different this field is compared to software. Because when you think about this, about firmware or hardware, you still think about this as an engineer. Well, I can write the code, I can kind of write the firmware, I can do these integrations, I can build this Bluetooth mesh. But actually, in the hardware, the big challenge is the physical world. And in software, you are getting so used to the speed that you can iterate and you can deploy and test things. You can scale to thousands of services almost instantly, and you can understand and test the load, etc. It's quite predictable from that perspective. Whereas with hardware, there is so many physical things that you kind of can't even prepare on the paper because, for example, signal interference. When you build the antenna and you calculate it all and you understand the power consumption and everything, but then you deploy the system, you build the system, which takes a lot of time actually to get the components together, source them from different sources, from China as well, and from even other countries, and then get it all arrived together, then figure out that for some reason one of the components doesn't really fit in, but then you solder it a bit, make it work. But then you see that for some reason antenna doesn't perform as it is supposed to be in the datasheet. And then you see that there is actually the body interference. And like when you wear a ring on your finger, apparently your body can also affect the quality and strength of the Bluetooth signal. So you discover all these things that in software aren't really a thing. They can be a thing at a huge scale of like billions of requests a second. You can start seeing some unexpected things, but usually it's still much more easier to replicate and actually prepare and build for it. Whereas the feedback loop with hardware, it's much slower. It's really, it can take you a day to compose something, to build something, and then it takes a few hours to test it properly. And test it in different environments as well, because again, you test it in your room, it works fine, but then you go to the care home and it doesn't work that well there because of all the other devices, because of the walls thickness, and because of the flat layout. And again, it just takes a lot of really time and a lot of try and error process to get this work, which is something that you really have to you have to accept as a software engineer, because previous estimations that you assumed it would take me like 3 days, and you can actually build this in 3 days. With hardware it can take really a month, because of all of the different factors, and even with the form factor that we went with, like the ring. Of course, we know that ring won't work for everyone, but one of the reasons we start with the ring as our first product is that signal quality from your finger can be better than from the wrist because of the tissue, because of the uniformness of the skin, and essentially how tight it can be on the finger. Because on the wrist, it's not really comfortable to wear it really tight, so you can get some light leakage, which adds extra noise to the waveform that you process. And again, just deciding to go with the ring as a form factor, it eliminates a lot of constraints, like hardware and physical constraints that you have with the wristband. But to get there, you need to test all of the different combinations, all of the different wristbands, all the different rings, and see what performs and works better, which again takes really a lot of time. But the possibilities are incredible. Like with the waveform analysis from the finger, we actually believe that we can build a bit more than just heart rate monitor. We can have some cardiovascular disease prediction as well based on the waveform, because there is much less processing compared to wristband, for example.
That's a wrap. We're at time. Thank you, Geoffrey and Artur, for joining me here today on Bits and Atoms. It was great to chat with you both, and I'll let you get back to building.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really good.